Okay, right, we are now live. So I'll just recap that. We've had apologies from Katie Downs. Appointment of chair and vice chair will defer for now until Kev is able to join. Any declarations of interest from members? No. Okay, thank you. Minutes of the board held on the 1st of July 2021. Assume members have had an opportunity to review those, and I appreciate that two of our one of our members is new and the other wasn't able to attend that meeting. But has anyone got any comments on the minutes or any follow-ups from officers that aren't covered under the items we've got on the agenda? No. Okay, thank you. Well, the next item is my annual report of the local pension board. So I'll happily introduce that. I'll assume that members have had an opportunity to read it. Just to give you, I think the covering report explains what the annual report is. So the local pension board has been established now for about 5 years, and its role is broadly comparable to a scrutiny committee in local government, in the sense that it operates as a critical friend to the administering authority, i.e. the pensions committee and investment subcommittee, in reviewing some of those policies and providing feedback to the authority. The annual report is a fairly straightforward document. It's not intended to be technical in nature. It's simply a digest of the board's activities over the last year. This report is a little shorter than it otherwise would be, because the county council, to whom the board previously reported, had a meeting in February at which it considered the last annual report of the local pension board. So this annual report only covers 3 meetings, including this one. But on page 25 of the agenda pack onwards, it discusses the work programme. So you can see what the board has considered. There are areas where I need to update what's happened at this meeting. And then in addition to that, there's a work programme for the remainder of the year set out from page 28 onwards. So that's the annual report. It is due to go to the West Northamptonshire Full Council on the 2nd of December, alongside the annual report from the Pensions Committee itself. So that's where the reporting in, and ordinarily we would invite the chair of the local pension board to attend that meeting. If we're not able to appoint one, then we may ask representatives to attend, although I don't think the previous chair was ever asked any questions on the report. It does tend to be quite low profile, I'm afraid. Happy to take any questions that board members might have. Yeah, question from Alicia, I think, and then Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Paul. I suppose my only question is on the report is, I suppose, given the number of meetings that won't have been quorate as part of that, is there any issue around actually the pension fund being able to complete its activity as intended if those meetings aren't quorate?
I think, well, I mean,
firstly, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, quorum is definitely something that we need to address, because I think 4 of 6 members is too high, particularly when we're carrying a vacancy from our North Northamptonshire council appointee, and we can see the impact that's had over the last 2 meetings. That said, the board is not a decision-making body, and although it can't formally transact business, board members are still able to review those the material that's put in front of them, and provide feedback to officers and provide a view. I think technically there is an issue, certainly in terms of the operation of the board. It's not satisfactory that we're in a situation where meetings are not quorate, and that needs to be addressed. But I think from a qualitative perspective, there's less of an issue. Councillor Pritchard, I think, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I did, yes. With regards to North Northamptonshire, do they have to approve the report as well?
No, West Northamptonshire Council is the administering authority.
Right.
So the pensions committee reports to West Northamptonshire Full Council and the local pension board likewise. I don't think there's any formal reporting relationship between either committee and board to the North Northamptonshire Council. They are effectively, and I'll ask officers in pensions to confirm this, I assume they have a similar status to other admitted bodies in that sense.
To other scheme employers, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we do actually have regular contact with Janice at North Northamptonshire because they are a very, very important employer in the fund, being so large. But beyond that, they are simply a scheme employer.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions, haven't heard back from Kev yet. What's next on the agenda? Sorry, scrolling back up.
Alicia's got her hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Alicia, did you have another question?
It was just more of a comment on the work plan because you specifically referenced that as well. That looks like it sort of covers the main business and things that we need to have oversight on. So that just for a comment, that looked reasonable.
Yeah, thank you. And I think now we've got new members on board, and I'm sure officers will, if they haven't already been in touch, will be in touch in terms of training. But this is very much a work program that officers are suggesting for the board. If board members feel that there are issues that you would like to find out more about, then please do communicate that to us so we can build that into future meetings, because we're very keen to have this as a more proactive board. Okay, I think the next item is action log.
Do you want me to take that one, Paul?
Yeah, sorry, it doesn't say on the agenda who's taking that one.
Well, the action log actually has nothing on it
No.
from the last meeting, so yeah, nothing to comment on there.
Okay, well, our lack of quorum won't impact on that in that case. Okay, next item is the Pensions Fund Administration Performance Report. I've got Mark down as the author of that one. Are you, or is it, oh, Joe, are you presenting that?
Yeah, I'll take this one, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So for the benefit of Alicia, who's new to the board, this is a report that we bring to every meeting to cover off the administrative performance of the Northamptonshire Pension Fund during the last period since the last meeting. This report is also presented to the Pensions Committee, so they do get the same information. I'll run through the detail of the report, starting in section 5 is where the detail begins. So the key performance indicators for the period 1st of June to the 30th of September 2021 are in Appendix A of the report. A few comments to make on this time. There are a number of reds and ambers which we would otherwise not normally be there. There has been a few challenging months. You may be aware of the system outage that West Northamptonshire Council had for a couple of days back in August. That had quite an impact on us, particularly around where we have turnaround times of 5 working days. That did knock a few out of the normal performance that we would do for that period. We've had also some sickness as well, COVID related and also flu related, that impacted on officers being able to turn out the work in the same period as well. And some slow performance issues with our system too, which are now being addressed. So they have all had an impact on our performance abilities during this period, but we're hoping that going forward we can recover from that. We do have, the most impact has been on the area of payment of pension of deferred benefits from deferred status. This is because this is our sort of quite a high volume area, and also because this is actually least priority in terms of payment. Active retirements are the priority area, so the impact has been felt on that one much more. I don't know if Mark wants to make any further comments on that area. Do you, Mark?
Well, I agree with everything you said. Yeah, I mean, it's the so deferred into payment. I mean, obviously some are critical where there's because obviously we're trying to deal with continuity of income. From active status, clearly there are continuity of income issues. Usually with deferred into payment, that's not the case, which is why they would be a, you know, if anything is although a priority than that would be, and we didn't used to have an indicator for that at all. So that the ones with all reds are an area we introduced an indicator. But I think it's what Joe said is absolutely right. The slow system issues were related to the outage. So what happened is they adjusted the firewall settings, and over time it got gradually worse and worse until it was absolutely apparent that there really was a critical issue affecting us. So it's like taking like a minute for a response time sometimes for people to you know, even to search for members. So that took a couple of days then to actually finally resolve. So it is completely resolved now, but that wasn't resolved finally until October. So that, yeah, I mean, that's fed through. I think there are slight performance issues in certain teams, as there always will be. I think they're getting addressed. The sickness we're through. It all also coincided with around the annual leave during the summer when you get lots of people off anyway. So if you have natural absences for summer leave, and then you have system problems, and then you have sickness all compounding it, what you see is a effect like you see in those indicators.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Next section of the report deals with the receipt of employee and employer contributions, and Appendix B of the report on page 41, if you're looking at the electronic pack, shows that we had a good run from March through to August, where 100% of employers were paying their contributions over on time, which is good. There was a bit of a blip in July, but that was probably annual leave related with the employers, but only down by 0.3% on that. So that's all positive that we're getting contributions through on time. Next section of the report deals with breaches of the law. This is where, for Alicia's benefit, any breaches of the law we do record, and then we have a decision to make as to whether we feel it's significant enough to report to the pensions regulator. In this particular report, we have 2 breaches of the law that we're reporting, none of which we deem to be relevant to report to the pensions regulator. The first breach is where we didn't receive information from one scheme employer to issue a pension savings statement by the deadline of the 6th of October 2021. I believe this issue is still ongoing, and that is related to a legacy employer within the scheme and the difficulties we are having in retrieving information from the new employer based on that. And then the other breach is where 1.4% of all active annual benefits, 1.4% of active benefit statements were not issued by the deadline of 31st of August. Again, this was due to a delay incurred from receiving information from the employers involved in that one. That has now been resolved, and all benefit statements have now been issued to all the employees affected by that.
Oh, Alicia's got a hand up at the moment, Joe.
I can come back at the end. It was just going back to the first section that you raised, but if you want to finish the report, and then, because I've got a couple of other points as well, I can do them all at once if you prefer.
Yeah, nearly finished, so yeah. So next section of the report is the internal dispute resolution procedure cases. This is the formal route for resolving any complaints a scheme member may have in terms of administration of their pension and decisions made. We've got 2 cases on here, which you will have seen. The first one you would have seen reported before. This has been an ongoing case where a scheme member transferred out to an overseas pension scheme several years ago, back in 2014, and a claims management company has taken their case on to seek compensation for that, because they don't believe we carried out the necessary due diligence and at the time. This has been ongoing for quite a while. We didn't uphold the complaint at stage 1, and we're still, we didn't uphold it at stage 2 either, which is dealt with by the monitoring officer, but I'm not sure this case would have completely gone away, being that a claims management company is involved. We may see this one go to the pensions ombudsman, but we haven't heard that yet. The second one on here is where we've had a delay in confirming benefits payable due to us not holding any electronic records. This suggests to me, given that if this is the Northamptonshire Pension Fund and what I know about the Northamptonshire Pension Fund, that we don't actually have any liability for this member. However, the member is insistent that we do. We're currently undertaking inquiries as to where we think the benefits may have been transferred to. And this has involved talking to their previous, the pension schemes after us that the member has held, to see if they've had any information from us or any dealings with us. We still believe that we don't hold any liability, but we're waiting for that evidence to transpire. We did have an issue during this where we couldn't access the council's storage facility due to COVID, but now we can, and we weren't able to find any records there either that would suggest that we still hold liability. So that's still ongoing, and will continue to be ongoing until we've received all the information to be able to make a decision on that case. The end of the report just details the employers that have been omitted and have left the fund during the reporting period. And that's the end of the report. So happy to take any questions anybody has.
Elise, you've still got your hand raised. Did you want
Yeah,
to-
so I'll go if you want. So the first question, probably picking up on the bits that you first started with around the new indicators, and it's great to see an indicator around the deferred members as well. I was just interested in how many people were impacted by that delay, and if so, how did you communicate with anybody? Communicate with them on that?
The numbers are shown in the over target column. So 13, 13, 9 and 20. So about 50 people there. We would have obviously acknowledged and responded to any emails we received, but as a standard, we don't necessarily communicate with anything that we're going to not meet, not as standard anyway, unless it's been a really active case.
Joe, do you want me to add a couple of words on to that? Yeah, so with the 2-day outage, obviously the immediate problem was if we've got a 5-day turnaround time on, let's say, paying a retirement benefit, clearly some of them we'd not necessarily be able to do them all within that time frame, but they were getting their pensions a couple of days late. That's all. As time went on, and this is now to do with that slow response times from the server. Initially it wasn't thought to be any sort of endemic problem. We'd have a bit of slowness, let's say around early mornings and then around lunchtime, and we'd see if there's anything. But as time moved on, it was clear there was some sort of real problem, and so we started inquiring of our software supplier at the one end and also the corporate IT, and eventually they realized between the two of them where the problem lied, and it was due to some changes that had been made to our firewall settings after that outage. So it kind of crept up on us, and but then became really obvious there was something really quite wrong over the space of a couple of days in October. But we think for a sustained period, it's having some impact on performance. So it wasn't like we had something where we had to communicate to a great deal of people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Just want to follow up there. In terms of, obviously, the pension committee seeing this report, did they ask any questions around resilience or any other actions that you need to take to either flag things sooner or your relationship with the IT providers in terms of how that communication flow works between, and do they understand the criticality of what you're doing?
They haven't seen this. I think you are, because of the timing of the meetings. Because we identified something had happened in October. This is the first time we've mentioned this to either any of our governance bodies. We will discuss business continuity later in the meeting.
Yeah, I can
Anyway,
see you've got some bits on risk management and that later on.
Yeah.
Just a couple of points on the report. There was some footnotes in Appendix A, but there was no footnote. So it was against the SLA, not against target. There was a footnote 1 and 2 that I couldn't find
Sorry,
in the PDF.
they should have been removed. They are in the body of the report. The
Yeah,
excerpts.
that's when I went back and found the details
Yeah.
in there. And then on your 5.4.2, the one that's seeking, and I thought as well, it sounds like that one could keep rumbling along. What sort of liability is there for that particular case?
Well, this is an emerging area within all pension schemes, really. What it centres around and what claims management companies will focus on is whether we at the time sent what is called the pension regulators Scorpion leaflet that warns members about scams. What I have an issue with is whether something's just a bad investment or whether it's a scam. But what we have problems with in this case is that in the time period we're looking at this case occurred, we didn't actually save to the members' record what additional bits of information we sent out. So we can't actually prove that we did or didn't send the scam leaflet, but that's what the claims management company will focus on, and perhaps so will the pensions ombudsman, because we can't prove that we sent that. We've changed that system going forward, and everything we send, and our systems are so much more robust. We spent a lot of time working on transfers out and making them really robust. There's the whole industry guidance on this. It's a very big area, but we have seen cases where people have transferred out in public sector pension schemes where the pensions ombudsman has ruled that they must be reinstated. So that it is a big risk, and we'll have to see how it plays out. But there is such a fine line in quite a wide line, I think, maybe, between a scam and a bad investment. And I don't think the fund should be held responsible for bad investment.
The bad investment, yeah.
So,
Is it an insurable risk?
no.
No. It's an emerging thing.
Yeah. I don't think any of the ones we've got so far are of really, really high value that would be, really alarming to the funds. Is that correct, Joe? I've not seen anything which is a scary number.
No,
because of course we can potentially have transfers of £1 million. It can be, well, so I say 1 million, sorry, certainly over 500,000 do occur quite regularly to between public service schemes, but it would just take a really high earner to decide to want to move their assets out of the LGPS to somewhere else, and we'd have one like that. So nothing we've seen so far is of that kind of magnitude at all.
Okay, thank you. I didn't have any other notes on that paper. Thank you.
Any other questions for Joe or others? No. Okay.
Sorry.
Councillor Pritchard, yeah.
Yes, sorry again. When you were talking about obviously this particular problem, are we actually open to paying compensation?
We have not upheld the claim at the first and second stage of the process that we have control over. So as it stands, no, we aren't. But if the pensions ombudsman rule that we should, then we have no route to challenge that. So the pensions ombudsman's decision is final if it goes that far.
How do they calculate compensation?
It would be a matter of reinstating the benefits, so putting the members' deferred benefits back into the system, so that when they become payable, if they aren't already, it's as though she never transferred out. So effectively, we've paid out a transfer value relating to those deferred pensions of X amount. That will be the cost to us, to the fund.
Would there be any consequential loss at all involved in that?
There's what the issue is here is that all these cases are public information. So there is a bit of reputational risk, but I wouldn't say it is reputational risk. This is just a phase that we're going through in the industry. We won't be the first and we won't be the last if the pensions ombudsman upholds this. Claims management companies are really getting involved. There's money to be made. They will no doubt be taking a cut in this.
Yes, yeah.
And we have seen not this particular case, but another case in the other fund that we administer, they're taking a chunk of about 20%.
Wow.
Which the member does not need them to do, in my opinion. The member could just do this process themselves if they felt strongly enough about it. So it's an emerging industry that we as a fund started to experience for other local government pension funds, and now I'm hearing in our regional group there's a lot of contact around these matters. So, but we as an industry, as the LGPS, across the board, we've strengthened our processes, so this cannot happen going forward. So
yes, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank
well,
you.
we're minimizing the risk of it happening, but humans are involved in our processing. So even, you know, any member of staff could, you can circumnavigate processes, as you know, in anything. So there's always a risk, but we're a lot tighter, as Joe says, than we were previously. Of course, the fund is a pool of cash which is notionally allocated to each and all the employers. So, you know, where does this ultimately get funded from? It gets funded from the scheme employer, and, you know, related to that thing. I think that's the other factor in play here. That's I think, again, though, I think the ones I've seen are all very, very large employers involved. I think we've only got I don't even know if we've got another one within the Northamptonshire Fund at all, but a few came in across the two funds we administered let's say it was a year ago last Christmas, wasn't it? I think, and they all, and they all pre-pandemic, and they all came in at once, and so we were expecting there to be quite a flurry, but it's been quiet since on this front. So hopefully we won't get too many of them.
Any other questions from members on the administration performance report? No? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the business plan and medium-term strategy update. I think, Joe, is that you again?
Mark on this occasion.
Oh, it's Mark. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll just walk through it. So it starts on page 45. The first activities are all relating to procurement exercises. The one which has been completed to the extent that we've reappointed Mercer, our investment consultant. We did hit delays on the actual finalising the contract, which is still ongoing due to the value of the contract and the attestation clauses that need to go in. So, i.e., who needs to sign it from the Mercer end. So, because of the value, it needs to be sealed, and then following on from that, it does need a couple of senior directors to sign it from Mercer at the Mercer end. So, we're just completing that at the moment, but we have reappointed Mercer through a sort of a call off the framework at a pool level. We've also reappointed our custodian, Northern Trust. So that's also been concluded. I'll pass over the next couple because they relate to future activities. The 4.5 on page 48, we're just keeping an eye on how things are going in terms of local government organisation and the workflows from there. We're not really, whilst there are sort of small restructures ongoing, we're not seeing huge volumes of extra activity come through at the moment. But we're obviously keeping an eye on whether there are any really large scale exercises that might cause us any administrative issues. So that's the purpose of that activity. The BCP in 4.6, we did, I think it's probably since the last LPB meeting, we did obtain a revised business continuity plan template from WNC. It's the same one as actually which is in place at North Northamptonshire Council as well. And they are very different from the format that our existing business plan our business continuity plan was under with LGSS. So we have done a first go at that at an officer level to populate what are sort of different scenarios, such as it says here, like loss of premises, loss of staff, loss of IT, ironically a fuel crisis where people can't get to work. So all of the loss of the network, the fuel crisis was actually very helpful to help us stop populating that. That will obviously come to a future board for consideration once we've fully populated it. In tandem with that, and obviously with some links, we've also been doing some work on the cyber resilience side of things. So there's a Joe's going to talk you through some work on that later, so I won't dwell on that. But those are two really, really important areas, obviously. If I skip over the next one, which is again future activity, to 4.9 GMP rectification. If you've been in and around this board for any length of time, this has been on here for years. We did have a software tool which we've utilized and have been able to now to sort of close down as a cost to the fund to get some data loaded onto our system. We'll be doing some final work from January on this, but a significant exercise to get data loaded onto the system has been completed with the use of that software tool. So that's moved forward. Something which also has moved forward is the McLeod age discrimination remedy. So the current phase, if you like, is to get any revised data from the scheme employers. So we have been a fund that has always asked employers to continue to provide us with hours changes, all the pay details we need. What we're effectively asking employers is, have you failed to provide us with any information? So we've sent out a template. We've given a deadline. It's a 2-month deadline. There is the ability within our timelines to have a single extension on that. But we're being very careful with regards to, the plan around this. And then we will be using, again, a sort of a system-based tool with Hayward, our software supplier, to load those changes into the system. Because they are, if you can imagine, they may be inserting into the middle of lots of other things that have already been added. So it's not a particularly easy job to do that, hence the need for a software tool to do that. And then after that, obviously the remedy will come through next year, and will nationally, LGPS funds will have to make, update records, potentially enhance benefits and all the other work that's required. So that will be obviously from 2022-23 onwards, but we'll see what comes out nationally as to the timelines around that. I'll just pause there. So I've gone through quite a few. Are there any questions on anything up to 4.11? Julie.
Yes, I was just going to ask in relation to the McLeod case. What kind of response have you had from employers so far?
It's a half decent response. There is not. We're in the. I think we're in the middle of the 2-month window. In our major employers, we have indeed payroll providers we've been having very direct discussions with. So it's our communication to some of the smaller ones has been through. Through if you like, through the written form in terms of email, and then obviously we've got a number set up. We've got an employer forums coming actually over the next 2 weeks as well, so we will be obviously raising it there. But we'll obviously have much. If we get to the end of the 2 months and we've not had contact from employers, then we'll be obviously ramping up the communication. I think we'll give around about another month if need be then. But people like the WNC payroll, which are responsible for, the majority, to be honest. We actually started conversations with them even up to a AD level about the timing of it and what our expectations are. So that's been a very different process to some of the other employers in the fund who have a lot less data they deal with.
I guess my only other question on that is in relation to the valuations and how actually this is going to impact on the percentage of employers' contributions, or if there is any anticipated impact.
The impact, as the actuary understood it last time, it wasn't huge, but it was built into the contributions last time. I don't think this will particularly shift the dial,
Okay.
because in order for it to shift the dial, it needs to ramp up certain individuals' benefits, doesn't it? And whilst it's an incredible amount of work to work out whether people are better or worse off, how many people will be better off that's the question, isn't it?
Frustrating.
Yeah, so it's a very, very big administrative exercise, but the pounds and pence it will impact members' records, it'll be variable, but a lot of people it will make nil or very little difference.
Thank you.
We'll get to, once we get an idea of what that is, we can obviously start to communicate that to you. Are there any other questions up to that point in the? No. Okay. The valuation of the pension fund. We are obviously starting to do work, and well, indeed we've concluded one bit of work around it, which Corey's been responsible for, which is around looking at some of our particularly risky in inverted commas employers to the fund. Generally we know where there's sort of like no one stands behind them, or they're potentially quite significant in terms of their liabilities. That exercise has concluded. The activities that we're moving into now are obviously some of the decision making, particularly at the committee level, around things like assumptions, the Compass modelling, which is where we look at the rates for the local authorities who are stabilised and other bodies who are stabilised. The starting to look at the fund, the funding strategy and what that's going to look like in terms of how we treat different bodies. And then obviously as we move into next year, we have the data work at the officer level to share with the fund actuary. But I think we're just moving towards actually taking some data from our system to start to do some of the local authority numbers. So there is a plan. I wondered actually if we circulate it outside the meeting. I don't think it's actually attached as an appendix here, but we have actually got a sort of a high level plan that we can share with you.
Yeah. Mark, just to add there, we had an updated plan earlier on this week, which I shared for Michelle for the next cycle of committee and board reports, but we can certainly share that outside of the meeting.
Okay. I will touch on undecided leaver records because it's not moved in a direction I wanted it to, but I'm not over alarmed. You'll see that what we're saying here is there's been an increase of 335. So we've changed the way we report here. So there was previous year we were reporting how many status 2s, which are undecided leavers, where they're sitting on our system unprocessed, there were, or in process. What this is showing is the number which are age, so 6 months plus. But broadly, what we've done is we've created if you like, a project team that can deal with backlogs in-house. They're working through any cases which have been ring-fenced and allocated to them, which are over 6 months old. We then have a business as usual team that deals with cases coming in. And the problem we have at the moment is that there are more coming in than the resource that was available to deal with it in the BAU team, hence the increase. However, there are so many things going on here, it's untrue really. Obviously, it includes cases where we are trying to get information from the employer in order to process them. It includes cases which may not even be leavers, but we've got them set because we think they might have left. It does include actually, so this is, if you like, we're trying to improve the data here. So we may actually take a different type of cut in future. It includes things like payroll changes, where a school, for example, changes who's doing the payroll, then we have to move everyone over. So the outgoing payroll makes everyone a leaver. We then need to get the information from the new payroll provider in order to be able to actually do anything with the records. It includes things like end of school year. That certainly is feeding into our main figures, our headline figures. So we had an increase of 1,500 in between August and September alone as a result of the end of the school year. So there's a lot going on. We're trying to basically get or improve the quality of the reporting, so we are genuinely only telling you about definite age leavers, so you can understand exactly what the backlog is. But as I say, many thousands of those are definitely in progress and with third parties for information. The other thing I will finally add on this point is sometimes when you get more information, it obviously slows the administration. One thing that's happened is whenever we process a benefit now, we have to check on a national database as to whether the individual has any other pension rights in local government. And if they do, and they predate what we hold, we have to write to the previous scheme to see and actually have an exchange of information. So that's also delaying cases now as well. Even though they've left us, there are things that we still need to retrospectively sort out on the record. So lots going on. I'm not worried at this point in time, but I hope to see that number start going down in the new year. We have postponed work on the next one. This was where we have lots of unclaimed refunds on our system. We did try to start to go through to actually get members to, well, encourage members to claim them. I cannot see that as a priority over and above what I just described in terms of unprocessed leavers. So we have just paused that work so we can throw extra resource into the other areas of priority work in the service. Obviously we'll see what the committee think of that when we take it to the committee. The AVC review is unfortunately going slowly because of a lack of engagement from Prudential. You're probably aware Prudential are having their own problems, which are gradually resolving themselves, but they haven't been engaging with us. There's not really a huge number of other providers in the marketplace for us to consider, and we're hoping that another large player will come in actually, who are starting to deal with AVCs. Pause there. Are there any questions on those other couple of activities? Okay. Finally, if I just sort of move to the investment related activities, multiple investment strategies is something which we looked at, thinking it might be of material benefit to certain categories of employers. So this is where we, for example, might allow a certain employers to have a more risky investment strategy and others a far more conservative investment strategy. As it turns out, we took a recommendation to the committee not to proceed with that because we couldn't see a material benefit. So that and indeed the committee did resolve not to proceed any further with that project. But if the assets and liabilities, if the assets moved up about 20% over liabilities and sustained that, then it might be of benefit for certain categories of employer. So we may come back to that at a future date. The employer covenant monitoring I mentioned as an activity related to valuation. The asset pool, you've got a paper later on. The RI policy is obviously been a huge piece of work, and we're hoping that in December the committee will sign off effectively a new RI policy that has gone for a full consultation with scheme members and employers, and it does point to significant, potential changes in the portfolio, particularly around decarbonisation and managing the climate risk. So that's quite a large piece of work. The property review is just kicking off. Property is an asset class which has changed significantly over the years from being, quite retail based. Actually, a lot of our investments previously through office, and now we're trying to find alternatives to that, like such as distribution hubs, some residential, of course, as well. So it's moved considerably from where it is. And we are looking at a pool-led solution for that at some point. And then benchmarking, the next ISC are going to see a brand new format for the quarterly performance review documentation. So I think those are shared with you. So if you want to see what that looks like when the ISC pack comes out, you'll be able to see what the new quarterly performance review looks like. And I don't believe I think that's my last comment on any of the business plan activities.
Any further questions or comments from Mark? Alicia, you've got your hand raised.
Thanks, Paul. It was just an overall comment, really. It's a great level of detail in the report in terms of all the different activities. But the couple of things that struck me were, one, have you got enough capacity to deliver all of this, particularly given quite a lot of those target dates are in the next sort of 4, 5, 6 months, sort of running into sort of up to March, April 2022. And probably just a comment on your where your procurement, your delays all seem to be around legal. So whether that's something in planning for future about allowing more time for lawyers to be lawyers.
Yeah, we were sure. To be fair, we've experienced things on the procurement side which we've never experienced before in our previous procurement. So it's definitely absolutely we'll have to allow a greater window for review by what was LGSS law, but it's now Pathfinder. I think it was around the how they needed to now be sort of, if you like, signed off, and if they go through the sealing process, then that, because of value, then that does lead to other requirements which we weren't aware of, which is around the attestation clauses. I think we're not the first local authority to do this, but we're one that, our suppliers have not seen this very often. So we aren't unique, but this requirement is something that they've had to deal with a few times in the past. I suspect it will be something which is more widespread. So we'll just build it in future, absolutely. Resourcing, I certainly think we'll need more when it comes to McLeod remedy. But what we have done is and I am doing a formal review of the structure. So what we have at the moment is formally 5 direct reports into myself. But for example, Corey, if you look at what he's formally looking after, has a really wide remit, which covers systems as well as employers and communications. What I've done informally is effectively put in an extra report into myself through an acting up arrangement to create capacity to deal with projects and also align systems with that role. So I'm going to effectively just restructure to try to put what I've got informally in place formally. At the same time, my investment lead, who was Paul Tyso, he moved on to the pool. It's now Richard. Perry is retiring early next year. So at that point, I am actually taking the opportunity to merge funding and investments under one person, and we've put in some extra resource under that role already to support that. The final comment on resourcing is my biggest concern is around some of the BAU areas. And I think we may have it right, but the proof will be whether they can handle the volumes coming in, particularly around those early leavers. So they're just recruiting 2 vacancies at the moment. I have added 1 person in. Once they're settled, we'll see whether they can keep on top of the business as usual volume.
How does the committee sort of scrutinise your budget setting process? So for the resources that you need for the administration of the fund, because I know in the past it's been very much, you know, you need to keep your costs down, but actually you have a big capacity of work and things that come along that you need to do, and it's senseless to then not resource things properly at the detriment of, you know, member services getting things processed, etc.
We so if I'm making significant changes, then I will kind of like almost have a section within when we set the business plan for the following year. We've done before where there's been a section. If like I think I was recruiting 4 people one year at once, so I did include a separate section as a rationale for that, and then it obviously fed through to the numbers. If I'm just putting 1 extra person in, let's say, then I just, you know, it barely touches the sides of the staff budget. But there is, you know, I do occasionally get pressure from isolated individual members at committees about, you know, elsewhere we're seeing budgets go down. Why aren't yours numbers going down? But that's the exception rather than the rule. So yeah, so I just try to set out exactly what we need and why, and then it's up to the committee to either approve or not approve the budget.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Yeah. Off the back of that, I was just wondering in relation to the overheads that you're charged from the council. Has there been any headway in actually trying to get those reduced? That could then perhaps fund more resources.
Okay, these are still the rates which were payable under NCC, which have been ported over. WNC are going to take a look. I'm not sure if it's actually in this financial year or not. The way it's been described is actually something I think it's something for the following financial year, but we do sometimes get really late notification of charges. So obviously sitting behind that number is a line by line breakdown. And I know anecdotally that, you know, for example, one of the areas have said that actually what they're charging is significantly underplayed. It's, you know, the true cost is significantly above that. That won't be the same for all lines, but certainly for one of the system related lines, that is the case. So I wouldn't expect it to go down. I would actually expect it to go up at some point. It's barely moved for a number of years. And we did knock out a couple of LGSS related charges which were quite significant. So in the past there was some capture of historical efficiency savings that were charged to funds. We did knock those out, so it did reduce the total amount being paid, but the actual corporate overhead line itself hasn't been touched for some time materially. And
there is an opportunity to challenge those, I guess, that's in place.
Yeah, if there's so what happened previously is it went to the committee as part of the approval process. If it came in mid-year, we would just do it mid-year, but it would be a breakdown of what the items are. And if we need someone to come and give us further rationale as to why, then we would do that. But there is sort of a line by line breakdown of what each area is charging and how it's made up. I don't think we're being. I can tell you now, we're not being overcharged because the line by line breakdown has some rigorous approval of it at the time, and I think it's only went up once within a number of years. So they do need to look at it, to be fair. So you're
benchmarked against the local authorities?
We don't. We do. I mean, we do. Sorry, to be clear, we do benchmark our costs as part of a SIPFA benchmarking club, and we vary from being cheap to middle to it moves around all over the place. I think what happens is people see what the draft is, and then seem to make adjustments, and then before you know it, you're at the other end of the spectrum. So I take benchmarking with a pinch of salt, but we're not out of kilter overall. So we're quite happy. I think we'll see what we need to see what the breakdown will be under WNC once they actually themselves work out what the costs are.
Yeah.
And then we can obviously have a discussion then.
Yeah, thanks.
If that's something you explicitly want to see, then we can make sure that as soon as we get that, that's actually included in the LBB agenda.
I think that'd be useful.
Okay. So we'll put that in the action log. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I didn't really have any other comments on the activities. I suppose what I should mention, because obviously the numbers are looking fairly in line with forecast. I mean, the total variance on the admin expenses is only 26k on a 2.2 million initial budget. The one pressure we're gonna have, which we've got a 5k underspend on staff, but the announcements around WNC pay awards are obviously going to feed through here, perhaps in a way that was I'm not quite sure what the impact will be at a service level until I see the final details, but it may be that we flip to an overspend on staffing as a result of that, because obviously we've been building very, very modest things into our pay, into our budgets on staffing up until now. So I guess a warning for a future iteration of this.
Although conversely, your contributions will increase on that basis as well. So your percentage of spend to income is impacted. So
yeah, I mean that is the case. I guess the bit which is under my control, in inverted commas, is obviously the admin budget. The governance is quite hard to. The governance line is quite hard to control because it includes consultancy costs, and the invoiced investment expenses are dependent on how well managers have performed. So the only bit the bit which is most under my control, although it's influenced by events, is the admin budget. So I like to try to keep that quite in line. But you're right, Alicia. I think if that's all the questions there are, I guess we're happy to move on to the next item.
That's the governance and compliance report.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, governance and compliance report.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thank you. Again, for Alicia's benefit, this is a report that we bring every meeting. It gives an update on what's going on in the world of governance and compliance and what action is being undertaken by the government departments such as MHCLG, the Pensions Regulator, and the Scheme Advisory Board. For the last few months, things have been really, really quiet. So this report is quite brief, covering 3 items only. So the first item is change of name of MHCLG to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Going forward, we'll probably just refer to that as the department because that's what the LGA are doing. So rather than have to say all that each and every time and refer back to MHCLG, that's what I will do. Can I just check if anyone get any feedback from me?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear myself twice.
I think it must be Paul because I think he was the only one with his microphone on.
Let me mute and see if that improves.
Okay, I think that's better, isn't it? Yeah, good. So following on from that, we have an update on the Pension Regulator's new code of practice. A bit of background on this. Pensions Regulator currently has 15 codes of practice and 1 relating to the LGPS, which is number 14. A year or so ago, if not longer, they decided to put all the codes of practice together into one to make it easier, although looking at what we've seen so far, I'm not convinced it is easier for the LGPS because now ours is spread across effectively 15 codes of practice. I mean, and the way it's been presented to us so far, it's really difficult to find what's changed for us and what hasn't changed. But either way, they're pushing ahead with this consolidated code of practice, but there is a delay in that they've received so much feedback from the consultation period that it was supposed to become live in November, but that's now been pushed back to summer next year, whilst they sift through all the consultation responses. What we're hoping is by that time, there will be a web version with some filtering solutions that will help make it easier for public sector pension schemes to determine what's changed and what hasn't changed, because we do have 6 months to become completely compliant with any changes in the code of practice. We're currently compliant with what was in the code of practice number 14, but we just need to be very aware of what's changed and then achieve compliance with that within 6 months of next summer, assuming it's released next summer. But as you'll see, there's an activity in the business plan with regards to that, with the dates now changed in relation to that. The last point I want to make in this report is regarding skills and knowledge opportunities. Paul made a reference to this at the beginning of the meeting. A big part being on the board is undertaking training so that you're able to scrutinise the decisions of those made by the Pensions Committee and those made by officers. As you'll be aware, you will have received emails from Aon regarding several online web training sessions. They took place in a live format during the summer and finished in September. These are now a feature of our skills and knowledge framework, and we do want them to be compulsory and that every member of the committee and the board and officers complete that training. The deadline we have set for that is the 31st of December 2021. We do know that Aon have been sending emails saying that web links will be able to view at your own leisure, and they'll be available until the 31st of March 22. But for our own performance and given the work we've got coming up with regards to the valuation and other activities, we would really be grateful if all members of the board and committee could complete that training by the 31st of December. Just so you're aware, we do get very detailed statistics from Aon as to who has completed the training, and also almost as much as how much time was spent with the screen open on that training. So we do get quite a bit of information, so we are able to see who has undertaken the training. But like I say, it's so important that members do that so that we can run the committee and boards efficiently and as they're designed to be. But that's it from that report. So happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Joe, for absolute clarity on that training point, if people view it via catch up on YouTube, can they get those statistics on view time then as well?
Yes.
Ouch.
Yes. It's all about accessing the link. So yes.
Okay.
Yes. So.
Okay, if there's no questions from members, and I think we're on to risk monitoring. So is that you, Michelle, or is it Mark?
Yeah, thank you. So on the risk monitoring report this time, there's just one update to the main risk register under section 5.1 of the report. As you'll see there, risk 24 has increased in both gross and residual score. And this is down to, yeah.
Michelle, sorry, do you want to turn your camera off? You're breaking up a bit.
Can you not hear me?
You're probably better now.
Yeah. Is that any better? Yeah. Sorry. I live in the worst area for internet connection. So I'll start again just in case any of that was missed. So under the risk register, there's just been one main change to the actual risk register itself under section 5.1 of the report. and its risk 24 has increased in both gross and residual score, and this is due to some recruitment issues that we've noticed quite recently, and in terms of recruiting staff and having to run recruitment exercises more than once in some circumstances. So we felt it would be appropriate to highlight that in a risk register. So in line with the increase in scores, we've also added a mitigation which identifies the ability for us to utilise additional recruitment services as well to kind of counteract that in the short term and see if we get any improvement with that going forward. In terms of the short to medium term risks, we haven't identified any new risks in this section for this particular update. But what we have done is updated the pandemic risk and the skills and knowledge from what we've already had in previous reports. And this really is just to cover off what we've already spoken about this morning in terms of what we know with the pandemic in terms of cold and flu related illnesses that we've seen in the service recently, which has impacted on service capabilities, and also just to confirm to you that we are seeing some movement back in the office a bit more now, so service activity is resuming, mainly in areas such as the telephone systems, which are all now operational, which weren't so much so during the pandemic. So just to keep you up to date with developments there. Same with the skills and knowledge, just updated there just from what really Joe's just said in terms of the training has all now been delivered. So it's now just a case of monitoring that training just to make sure that all members actually view it all and undertake the training by the end of December, so that we can kind of make sure that that risk is completely mitigated by being confident that all the training has been undertaken. So that's the kind of updates on this particular report. Just to mention on the format of the risk register. So what we're going to do going forward is actually keep the risk numbers the same, just to avoid any confusion with any version control issues. What we've done for this particular report, as you'll see on the executive summary, is we've added in a risk position column with some arrows on there, just to show you where that fits in with the risk numbers staying the same. What the long-term plan is to actually take a much deeper look at this to see if we can present the executive summary a bit better. So what we're hoping to do for future meetings is redesign that front sheet so that it's absolutely clear where the risks are staying the same, but the movements are changing. So we'll be able to show you the changes and the tracking of the changes over the course of time. So that's something that we've got in the pipeline coming up, just to kind of display that a bit better. But apart from that, I'm obviously happy to take any further suggestions you've got for the risk register, or take any comments on anything that we've proposed today.
Hello, it's Ken Pritchard. With regards to the risks that you've just outlined, you state there the risk that the response.
Was there any further comments?
Michelle, Councillor Pritchard was talking. Could you not hear him?
Hello.
I don't think Michelle can hear any of us. Is anyone else able to field this if Councillor Pritchard asks?
All it really is I just wanted to know what additional recruitment avenues were actually being pursued.
I'll take this question, shall I? The council has some.
I heard the very end. I can now.
Michelle, I think Joe's going to take this one actually. So
Right.
I
Okay.
think we need to remove
Oh,
Michelle from the
okay.
meeting.
Yeah. Paul, are you able to remove Michelle from the meeting?
oh, she's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. So in answer to Councillor Pritchard's question, the council has some specialist recruitment agencies through the use of their e-recruitment system. They're a bit more targeted, and because at the moment the only avenue that we really have is the council's jobs website. Plus we can also use the LGA who can circulate our or the local government pension committee part of the LGA who will circulate our in-job vacancies around to other funds. Again, that's not really a very effective way of doing it, and we don't really find much success from that. So yeah, there's a specialist recruitment agency via the council that we are using.
Okay. Alicia's got her hand raised.
Oh, it's only a quick one. I'm not averse to the set out for the risk management, and I've seen all sorts of risk reports over the years. So this is actually, the cover bit is actually quite succinct. I think where it is lacking is just where perhaps got amber risk is just what control actions are being taken to try and reduce that, or at least maintain it at that level if there's things that are outside of your control. But I thought it was a good report on risk. I thought it was thorough. It was easy to read and get through. As well, I think some of the references around relevant objectives, that's more difficult to plot because I don't know what they are necessarily. I know you guys will know that because you'll be more familiar, but yeah, I thought it was quite good.
Thank you.
Suppose we could add as an appendix, the objectives are the objectives of the pension fund. So they are, we could have add those as an appendix. The front report, what I've seen work really well, which is what I'd like to move to, is where you have the previous gross and mitigated score versus the current, and then so you can really see the movement and what's happened very clearly on the cover sheet.
I've done something very similar actually for our audit committee and our various committees as well. So yeah, because what we're interested, we can never remember what the previous score is, so that movement. So all you'd need is just an extra column in there, and it's easy then to see what the movement in the score is between, without necessarily having all the arrows and everything going on.
Yeah.
Any other questions on?
It wasn't necessarily a question, but it was perhaps just a comment in relation to the recruitment. I mean, it is a national picture, the difficulty to recruit. So I don't think it's something that's necessarily just specific to pensions, and from the indications that I've seen, that is actually coming to an end now, and we are, majority of employers are actually seeing an increase in applicants, so hopefully that will be something that will be happening in the pension space as well.
Okay, any other further questions on risk management? No. Okay, next item I've got is admission bodies, scheme employers and bulk transfer, which is Corey.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Yes, this is a report that's being brought to the board for post-scrutiny following a decision by the committee. The admission bodies, scheme employers and bulk transfer policy sets out various policies on how we treat different employers within the fund, particularly on their entry and exit to the scheme. It falls out of our policies within the funding strategy statement, and the amendments to this policy at this time very much follow on from the changes that we previously made to the funding strategy statement, which we brought to this board as well, concerning regulatory changes, giving the fund more powers to enter into long-term payment agreements with employers that are leaving the fund with a deficit, and also to review contribution rates between valuations where it's deemed there's been a material change in the circumstances for a particular employer or upon that employer's request. We've also taken the opportunity to update the policy in line with updates to other policies, across the fund, because it has been a few years since we last reviewed this policy. So, for example, we've updated the list of objectives to make sure that matches the latest fund objectives. And we've also added in some changes where practical processes have changed over the years as well, particularly around how we account for the cash flow of different employers and how we track their funding positions as well. There is a list of the changes within the report itself, and a track changed copy of the strategy has been provided. I don't have anything to add to either of those, so I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Alicia?
So it's only a quick question. You said this has been scrutinised by the committee. So what sort of feedback did you get from that?
It was accepted from the committee as it was, recognising that these are regulatory changes. They'd seen the kind of changes that were coming through the funding strategy statement where we'd updated that. So it wasn't really anything that was coming as a surprise to the committee.
No. So are there any adverse impacts on the fund as a result of any of the regulatory changes?
No, because it's all entering in new discretions for the fund, so we're very much in control of what happens there.
Yeah, so it gives you better control over those coming and going from the scheme.
It does, yeah, and it's in line with things that we've done informally over the years, and which the scheme as a whole have done with employers where it's appropriate to do so. It's just putting these practical practices on a formal legislative footing. They weren't prohibited previously, but they weren't expressly allowed for either.
Yeah, excellent. No, very good. Good piece of work. Thank you.
Any other questions on Corey's report? Corey, do you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think our last item before the two exempt items is the training strategy, which is Michelle. Michelle's back with us.
Well, I'll give this a go, but obviously let me know if I'm still having problems. I've changed laptops, so we'll see what happens. Can everybody hear me okay at the moment? Excellent. Yeah. Good start. Okay, so the training strategy has actually been on our agenda for quite a while to be reviewed. We were originally waiting on final guidance on the Good Governance Review and the Pension Regulators Singular Code of Practice, but it's now got to the point where we feel we've got enough information to do a preliminary review in light of obviously the Aon training that we've got on already, and knowing what the SIP for skills and guidance, skills and knowledge guidance is already telling us. So as you'll see in the pack, the proposed strategy is in Appendix A, and then just for ease of reference of what was already there in Appendix B is one with some track changes on, just so you can see what revisions have been made. So it's primarily been updated based on the skills and knowledge framework by SIPFA, and it's been overhauled with some of the guidance, just really to make sure it remains relevant. What we will do is, once the actual final guidance comes out, we will re-review the training strategy at that point, just to make sure that there's no surprises that have come out of any of those. And if there are any changes, we'll obviously go back and just review those particular points. But in the large, we think that it should be fit for purpose as it is. So really the main considerations, I would say, for the board starts from section 11 onwards. And this is really about how we deliver the training and record the training. So as you may remember, under the current strategy, we have a credit system in place. And under that regime, we kind of had an 18 credit system, and that was the target that we wanted members to meet. Over the course of time, it's become apparent that even though you could get your 18 credits, it wasn't really ensuring that there was a wide enough range of knowledge within those credits. So for example, a member could have 18 credits, but it could be heavily investment based, or it could all be on external training where we've had no input into that training to fully understand the relevance. So that was one reason for kind of suggesting coming away from that method. Also, we found that the training credits themselves could be a bit subjective. So whereas we try to identify like the length of time of training and put credits towards that, it could actually be the case that if you were doing an external course, you could have, you know, more credits for doing 2 days than 1 day, but actually on that 1 day course, it could have been 100% relevant. And on the 2 day course, only a small percentage of it be relevant. So they're kind of the reasons for moving away from the credit system. So instead, what we want to do is have a compulsory kind of matrix-based system. And this, as you will already be aware, based on the Aon skills and knowledge modules, which really in our minds just will ensure that all members, firstly, are getting a wide range of knowledge on all of the topics. And secondly, that all members are getting a consistent message as well for the core training to ensure that everybody's receiving exactly the same message and obviously to the standard that it should be as well. So with the new training strategy, with this being made compulsory, this is the way that we deem that the strategy will be sufficient in making sure that members meet the expectation of taking all the training and understanding what they need to for their roles. In addition to this, there will be then supplementary training. So board members can ask to go on different training courses, and we will continue to highlight external training courses in the governance compliance report as well. So if any board members want to do anything in addition to that and we deem it relevant, that will continue as well. What we will also then do is put on additional training at various points where there's key decisions to be made by the committee. So for example, when valuation is coming up, there will be an additional training segment there. And also there will be training available as content, you know, it significantly changes and at the point where we feel it's appropriate for refresher training to be delivered as well. So same as it already is in terms of the monitoring of the training. Obviously we will monitor the training being undertaken by the board, and we will feed that information back to the chair, who will then take a view on whether they're happy with the level of training within the particular board. We'll also continue to record the training in the annual report. So that will go in the annual report and statement of accounts, as it already does as well, just so there's a bit of scrutiny there in terms of what we're doing as a board. But apart from that, that's what the thoughts are behind the changes to the strategy. And I'm happy to take any further comments or suggestions on that.
Oh, Alicia.
Moving around the screen trying to press different buttons. I think this is really good, and I think the change to the modules and being more prescriptive about what you want people to do, I think is really positive. I can imagine the credits thing, and I think I probably did pension committee under the credits thing, does get a bit confusing, and it's probably slightly easier for accountant type people to cover some of this off, because we do lots of mandatory CPD anyway around that. But I think this is it looks very good and very targeted. I'll be interested to see how you deliver refresher as well. I think utilising online type materials is also good, but I think you definitely need that balance between online stuff and face-to-face, because people are going to learn differently as well. And for some of it, you know, some of us working full-time, online's great because we can get onto it as well, which is good. But no, I thought it was really positive. What engagement have you had, level of engagement you've had so far with the online modules? Have you had good response and uptake of that? Especially you said they were
Yeah.
live originally.
They were. I must admit, we have started to receive the stats on that, but I haven't actually had the time to, because they were sending them after each individual one. I've got a lot of emails I need to physically go through and double check them all, but it did, from what I've glanced at, it does look like the engagement's been quite good to date. The plan will be in the next couple of weeks to go through all that, send reminders out for everybody, obviously with the deadline of the 31st of December. And then
On my list.
and then nearer that date, we'll have another assessment of where exactly we are at that point, so we can give that little extra nudge to anybody that we feel needs to get a few more in. But it looks quite positive from the outset. So.
Yeah. Do you think it will have an impact at all on being able to recruit to committees and boards in terms of the level of knowledge and skills people need to acquire?
Can I come in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has really pushed us forward in terms of delivering training electronically, and because we were struggling because we always tried to deliver joint training with the Cambridgeshire Fund to keep the costs down and to get that level of engagement. But certainly the pandemic has really opened up opportunities for online training, which I think has really benefited as well, because it is more convenient for people, because previously we were trying to hold training at Y Boston, which is sort of Bedfordshire in between Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire. But
yeah,
there was
I've
people
been there.
there was always people that said it was a bit too far for them, regardless of where they were. So, but yeah, I think a mixture of online and face-to-face is going to be really important going forward, particularly with matters around the valuation where you do want input from people. Online training is not so great for input. So sometimes people can be more comfortable in a room to discuss things like that. But yeah, depending on the topic, I think we'll tailor how we deliver it around that, and also catch-up sessions are really effective as well.
Yeah, no, it's good. No, really good piece of work.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Pritchard had his hand up, but his camera's off now, so I can't see him.
Yes, in fact, my question has just been answered with regards to the availability of face-to-face training, because I think, as you've probably highlighted, is that interaction sometimes, particularly when it comes to financial valuation, will be, should we say, more beneficial on a face-to-face scenario.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we recognise that, although online training during the pandemic has, been really good, and the uptake's been really good. Some people do prefer face-to-face, and you do get, I also think you get that bit of, as in working as a board together face-to-face, you get the kind of social side with it as well that you don't get from training. You build up those working relationships and that type of thing as well, that I think would be good to put a couple of face-to-face ones in as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions on that one? No. Okay. I think there's no urgent business unless colleagues in pensions advise me otherwise. So I think we're now on to the exempt part of the agenda with the access update and cyber resilience action plan. So I'm just